The words left his mouth with a terrifying, practiced calmness. "Go ahead and leave, Claire. But look in the mirror. You're 32, unemployed, and entirely dependent on my success. You will never, ever find better than me." Gwen stood in the center of their $10 million Tribeca penthouse, swirling a glass of Macallan, a smirk playing on his lips as she packed a single suitcase. He thought he had broken her. He thought she would crawl back within the week. Exactly 96 hours later, Gwen's phone vibrated with a news alert. He glanced down, and the crystal tumbler slipped from his fingers, shattering against the hardwood. There, splashed across the home page of the Daily Mail, was Claire. She wasn't crying. She was laughing, bathed in the golden hour light of the French Riviera, standing on the deck of a 300-foot super yacht. And the man wrapping a protective arm around her waist was Hunter Kensington, a notoriously ruthless hedge fund billionaire who could buy Gwen's entire company with his pocket change. This is the story of the ultimate revenge. The illusion of a perfect marriage is a lot like a meticulously built house of cards. Breathtaking to look at, demanding intense focus to maintain, and utterly destroyed by a single misplaced breath. For 7 years, Claire Sterling had been the architect of Gwen Belmont's life. When they met, Gwen was a charismatic but disorganized software engineer working out of a damp basement apartment in Queens. He had a brilliant idea for an AI-driven logistics platform, but absolutely zero business acumen. Claire, on the other hand, was a rising star at a premier Manhattan public relations firm. She had the connections, the polish, and the strategic mind. Because she loved him, Claire became his unpaid co-founder, PR director, and therapist. She wrote the pitch decks that secured his seed funding. She styled him for his first Forbes interview. She quietly stepped down from her own agency role when Belmont Dynamics began scaling, convinced by Gwen's fervent promises that they were building their empire. "We are a team," he would whisper into her hair at 2 a.m. after another exhausting investor dinner. "Everything I have is yours." But as Belmont Dynamics soared to a multi-hundred-million-dollar valuation, the team dynamic shifted. The Tribeca penthouse replaced the Queen's basement. Private black cars replaced the subway. And a cold, creeping distance replaced Gwen's affection. The fracture didn't happen overnight. It was a slow drip of micro-betrayals. Gwen started taking solo trips to Silicon Valley. He stopped asking for her input on company branding. Then came the gaslighting. If Claire asked who he was texting at midnight, she was paranoid. If she suggested Hope was drinking too much at networking events, she was stifling his process. The breaking point arrived on a rainy Tuesday in October. Gwen had left for a crucial board retreat in the Hamptons. He had carelessly left his secondary iPad, an older device he rarely used, on the nightstand. Claire wouldn't have touched it if it hadn't started buzzing incessantly, vibrating against the mahogany wood with irritating persistence. Annoyed, she picked it up to mute it. The screen glowed, illuminating a stream of iMessages that had synced from his primary phone. The contact name was simply CD. Claire knew exactly who CD was. Chloe Davies, Gwen's newly hired 24-year-old executive assistant. Chloe with the icy blonde hair, the perfectly tailored designer suits she couldn't possibly afford on an assistant's salary, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes when Claire was in the room. Claire's thumb hovered over the screen. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a violent, sick rhythm. She swiped to open the notification. "CD, miss you already. The house in East Hampton is too big without you." CD, image attachment. Claire clicked the image. It was a selfie of Chloe, wrapped in one of Gwen's signature oversized cashmere sweaters, lying in the master bed of the Hamptons property, the exact property Claire had spent 4 months renovating. "Gwen, almost done with these idiots. Be there in 2 hours. Have the champagne ready." The air in the room seemed to evaporate. Claire didn't scream. She didn't cry. A strange glacial numbness washed over her. She sat on the edge of the bed for 2 hours, meticulously scrolling through months of messages. She read about their dinners at exclusive omakase restaurants, while Gwen told her he was stuck at the office. She read messages where Gwen complained about Claire, calling her out of touch, stagnant, and a relic of his startup days. When Gwen walked through the front door of the penthouse that evening, his trip abruptly cut short due to bad weather, he found Claire standing in the living room. 2 suitcases sat by the door. "What's this?" Gwen asked, shaking off his wet umbrella, his tone laced with mild annoyance rather than concern. "Going somewhere." "You left your iPad," Claire said evenly, pointing to the device resting on the glass coffee table. Gwen's gaze flicked to the tablet, and for a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. His jaw tightened. But instead of apologizing, instead of falling to his knees and begging for forgiveness, Gwen did what narcissists do when cornered. He went on the offensive. He slowly walked over to the bar, poured himself a glass of Macallan, and turned to face her. "So you snooped," he said, taking a sip. "Congratulations. You found out that I need an outlet." "Do you have any idea the pressure I'm under, Claire? I run a $300 million company. You sit around decorating houses and going to Pilates. Chloe understands my world. You just live in it." The cruelty of his revisionist history hit her like a physical blow. "I built this world, Gwen. I pitched the investors. I managed the crises. I gave up my career so you could have yours." Gwen let out a short, hollow laugh. "You were a cheerleader, Claire. A glorified secretary who proofread my emails. Don't flatter yourself." He stepped closer, his presence looming and oppressive. "You think you're walking out of here with half? My lawyers have airtight trusts. You get what I decide to give you." "I don't want your money," Claire whispered, her voice trembling not from sadness, but from a terrifying, white-hot rage. "I just want out." That was when Gwen delivered the line. He looked her up and down, his eyes filled with absolute disdain. "Go ahead and leave, Claire. But look in the mirror. You're 32, unemployed, and entirely dependent on my success. You have no recent resume. Your old contacts forgot you exist. Walk out that door, and you'll be nothing. You will never, ever find better than me. You'll be begging to come back in a month." Claire didn't say another word. She picked up her suitcases, walked out the door, and let the heavy oak click shut behind her. The transition from a $10 million penthouse to a tiny 4th-floor walk-up in Brooklyn is a brutal shock to the system. Claire's best friend, Sarah, had taken her in without a second thought. Sarah was an art director at an independent magazine, living in a space where the kitchen sink practically touched the edge of her bed. For the first 3 days, Claire existed in a state of catatonic grief. She lay on Sarah's pull-out couch, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, replaying Gwen's cruel words on an endless loop. "You will never, ever find better than me. You'll be nothing." He was a monster. But part of her was terrified he was right. She opened her laptop and stared at her blank resume. 7 years. A massive, gaping 7-year hole in her professional history. She couldn't list co-founder of Belmont Dynamics because, legally, she wasn't. Gwen had made sure all the early paperwork only had his name on it, convincing her at the time that it was better for tax purposes. She had been so naive, so blindingly, stupidly in love. On day 4, Sarah practically dragged Claire off the couch. "Get up," Sarah demanded, tossing a fresh cup of coffee onto the small table. "You are not going to let a tech bro sociopath ruin your life. You are Claire Sterling. You fixed the PR disaster when that awful senator got caught in a scandal. You made Gwen Belmont look like a genius when he could barely tie his shoes. Update your LinkedIn. Now." With shaking hands, Claire logged into her dormant LinkedIn account. She changed her status to open to work. It felt like a pathetic cry into the void. But the void answered back. Less than 12 hours later, Claire's cell phone rang. The caller ID was a London number. Frowning, she answered. "Claire?" "Thank God, it's Evelyn." Claire sat up straight, Evelyn Kensington. Years ago, before Gwen, Claire had represented Evelyn when the British heiress launched a luxury sustainable fashion line. Evelyn was brilliant, eccentric, and fiercely loyal. "Evelyn, it's been years. How are you?" "I'm in a state of absolute panic, darling. That's how I am." Evelyn's clipped, aristocratic voice rushed through the receiver. "I need you. Not tomorrow, not next week. I need you on a plane to Nice in exactly 5 hours. Evelyn, I'm not really working right now. I'm dealing with a massive personal situation." "I know," Evelyn interrupted. "Word travels fast in New York, Claire. I heard about Gwen and his little blonde accessory. The man is a colossal idiot. But his idiocy is my salvation, because it means you are free." "Free for what?" "My brother, Hunter." Evelyn sighed, the exhaustion palpable in her voice. "He's hosting the Kensington Global Summit in Monaco this weekend. It's the most important philanthropic and networking event of the decade. Billionaires, heads of state, the works. Hunter's head of communications just had a total mental breakdown and quit yesterday. The press is circling. Rumors of a hostile takeover of Kensington Capital are leaking, and Hunter is ready to murder someone." Claire knew of Hunter Kensington. Everyone did. He was a ruthless, notoriously private hedge fund magnate. Unlike the loud, flashy tech billionaires like Gwen, Hunter operated in the shadows. He was old money, sharp intellect, and had a reputation for destroying anyone who crossed him in the boardroom. "Evelyn, I've been out of the game for 7 years. I can't handle Hunter Kensington and a global summit." "Rubbish. You are the smartest crisis manager I know. Hunter doesn't need a sycophant. He has 100 of those. He needs someone who isn't afraid of him, someone who can control the narrative. I told him about you. I told him you're the only one who can fix this." Evelyn paused. "Claire, he's paying $500,000 for 4 days of work." Claire dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the linoleum, splashing dark liquid across her bare feet. $500,000? Plus expenses. There's a first-class ticket waiting for you at JFK. Air France, Flight 022. Will you be on it? Claire looked around Sarah's cramped apartment. She thought about Gwen in his penthouse, laughing with Chloe, assuming Claire was weeping into a cheap pillow, utterly defeated. "You will never find better." "Send me the brief," Claire said, her voice steadying, a cold, sharp focus returning to her eyes. "I'll be on the plane." The Mediterranean air was thick with the scent of salt, expensive sunscreen, and aviation fuel. Claire stepped off the Monaco helicopter onto the helipad of the Solstice, Hunter Kensington's legendary 300-foot super yacht, anchored just outside Port Hercule. The transition was dizzying. 24 hours ago, she was sweeping up broken coffee mugs in Brooklyn. Now, she was surrounded by teak decks, infinity pools, and a staff of 30 moving with military precision. She was escorted to the upper deck, where the sea breeze whipped at her crisp white linen suit. Standing at the railing, staring out at the glittering Monaco skyline, was Hunter Kensington. He didn't look like a finance billionaire. He looked like a man who spent his life on the ocean. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair, windswept and unruly. He wore a simple navy polo and tailored trousers. As Claire approached, he turned. His eyes were a startling, piercing grey, taking her in with analytical intensity. "Miss Sterling," Hunter said. His voice was a deep, gravelly baritone, commanding immediate attention. He didn't offer his hand. "My sister believes you walk on water. I, however, require proof." "Good afternoon, Mr. Kensington," Claire replied smoothly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I don't walk on water. I prefer yachts. They're more efficient." A microscopic flicker of amusement crossed Hunter's eyes. "Evelyn said you were sharp." He turned and gestured to a large glass dining table, strewn with dossiers, iPads, and financial newspapers. "We have a disaster. The Financial Times is preparing to publish a piece tomorrow claiming Kensington Capital is over-leveraged in Asian markets, Right as I'm asking these people for $1 billion commitment to our climate initiative. My former PR idiot wanted to issue a blanket denial. What do you say?" Claire walked over to the table, her mind instantly shifting into a gear she hadn't used in years. The rust fell away. She scanned the top documents, absorbing the data. A blanket denial makes you look defensive. "It tells the sharks there's blood in the water," Claire said, her tone authoritative. "You don't deny it. You reframe it." Hunter leaned against the railing, crossing his arms. "Go on." "The FT wants a scandal. Give them a strategy instead," Claire continued, picking up a pen and tapping it against a dossier. "We leak a counter-narrative tonight to the Wall Street Journal. We state that Kensington Capital is deliberately restructuring its Asian assets to free up unprecedented liquid capital for a massive, aggressive acquisition in the green energy sector. We make your over-leveraged rumor look like a calculated maneuver that the FT simply misunderstood because they aren't thinking big enough." Hunter stared at her for a long, silent moment. The tension on the deck was palpable. The yacht's captain and 2 assistants hovered nearby, holding their breath. Hunter was known to fire people for breathing too loudly. Slowly, Hunter uncrossed his arms. He picked up a secure satellite phone from the table and handed it to her. "You have 2 hours to get the Journal on the line. Use my name. Get it done, Claire." It was the first time he had used her first name. It felt like a lock clicking into place. For the next 48 hours, Claire was a machine. She barely slept. She navigated the treacherous waters of Monaco high society, managed demanding dignitaries, completely squashed the FT rumor, and elevated Hunter's public profile from a shadowy financier to a visionary philanthropist. And Hunter noticed. He noticed how she effortlessly charmed a difficult Saudi prince. He noticed how she wasn't intimidated by his temper. Most importantly, they found themselves slipping into an easy, electric rhythm. During late-night strategy sessions in the yacht's main saloon, the strict professional boundaries began to blur. They drank scotch, debated global politics, and laughed at the absurdity of the ultra-rich. Hunter was everything Gwen was not. Where Gwen demanded applause, Hunter demanded excellence. Where Gwen was insecure and flashy, Hunter was anchored and intensely observant. The moment that changed everything happened on the 3rd evening, right before the opening gala. Claire was standing on the aft deck, checking the guest list on her tablet. She wore a stunning emerald green silk evening gown that Evelyn had forced upon her. The dress clung to her curves, the deep jewel tone making her eyes shine. The yacht lurched slightly as a large wake from a passing speedboat hit them. Claire, caught off guard in her stilettos, stumbled backward. The tablet flew from her hands. Before she could hit the deck, a strong, warm arm wrapped firmly around her waist, catching her seamlessly. She gasped, looking up. Hunter was right there, his face inches from hers. He was in a bespoke black tuxedo, looking devastatingly handsome. "Careful," Hunter murmured, his grey eyes locked onto hers, his grip on her waist remaining secure, perhaps a second longer than necessary. "I can't have my crisis manager going overboard before the caviar is served." The adrenaline of the near fall, combined with the sudden, intoxicating proximity to Hunter, bubbled up into Claire's chest. She let out a bright, genuine, uninhibited laugh. It was the first time she had truly laughed in months. Hunter's gaze softened. A rare, brilliant smile broke across his usually stern face. He reached out with his free hand, gently brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. It was a fiercely intimate gesture. "You look breathtaking, Claire," he said quietly. Neither of them noticed the small motorboat idling about 200 yards away. Neither of them saw the long, telescopic lens of a paparazzi photographer, tasked with getting shots of the billionaire's yacht, clicking furiously in the fading golden light. The photographer captured it all. The emerald dress, the billionaire's arm tightly around her waist, the tender touch to her hair. The radiant, joyful laugh of a woman who looked like she was exactly where she belonged. By 6 a.m. New York time the next morning, the photo was sold to a major international syndicate. By 8 a.m., it was the top trending story on every gossip and financial blog in the world. The mysterious beauty taming the Wolf of Monaco. At 8:15 a.m. in New York, Gwen Belmont, sitting in his Tribeca penthouse, eating breakfast across from a scrolling Chloe, opened his iPad. And his entire world stopped turning. The sound of Gwen's crystal tumbler shattering against the Brazilian walnut floor of the penthouse was the only noise in the room for a solid 10 seconds. Chloe, wearing one of Claire's discarded silk robes, looked up from her avocado toast, her brow furrowed in irritation. "Gwen, the cleaning staff doesn't come until tomorrow. What are you doing?" Gwen didn't hear her. His eyes were glued to the iPad screen. He zoomed in, his thumb trembling slightly. He recognized the emerald dress immediately. He had bought it for Claire 2 years ago for a charity gala, a dress she had never worn because he had decided at the last minute it was too flashy and told her to change into something black. Now, she was wearing it on the deck of a super yacht, and the man holding her, the man looking at her with an expression of undisguised fascination, was Hunter Kensington. "This is photoshopped," Gwen muttered, his voice tight with rising panic. "This is a PR stunt. She doesn't know Hunter Kensington. Nobody knows Hunter Kensington. The man is a ghost." "Who is Hunter Kensington?" Chloe asked, leaning over the marble island to peer at the screen. Gwen snapped his head up, glaring at her with a sudden, vicious annoyance. "He runs Kensington Capital, Chloe. He manages $50 billion in assets. He could buy Belmont Dynamics and turn it into a parking lot just for fun." He snatched his phone from the counter and dialed Claire's number. It went straight to voicemail. He dialed again. Voicemail. A cold sweat broke out on the back of his neck. The power dynamic in his mind, the neat, satisfying narrative where Claire was currently weeping in a squalid apartment, realizing her life was over, shattered as thoroughly as the glass at his feet. "You will never, ever find better than me." The words echoed in his head, suddenly sounding less like a prophecy and more like a cruel joke he had played on himself. While Gwen spiraled in New York, Claire was dealing with the fallout of the photograph in the main saloon of the Solstice. She stood before Hunter, her tablet pressed against her chest, her professional armor firmly in place despite the flush in her cheeks. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the silver in Hunter's hair. He was nursing an espresso, reading a physical copy of Le Monde, looking entirely unbothered. "Mr. Kensington, I apologize," Claire began, her voice steady, but clipped. "I should have been more aware of our perimeter. I can draft a statement immediately framing the photo as a candid moment between employer and contractor. I will ensure this doesn't distract from the summit's climate initiative." Hunter slowly lowered his newspaper. He looked at her over the rim of his espresso cup, those piercing grey eyes unreadable. "Sit down, Claire," he said. She hesitated, then took a seat on the white leather sofa opposite him. "Did you stage the photographer?" Hunter asked bluntly. "Absolutely not," Claire fired back, her eyes narrowing. "My job is to control the narrative, not become it. If you think I orchestrated a cheap tabloid stunt to—" Hunter held up a hand, silencing her. "I don't think you did. I just needed to hear you say it." He set his cup down and leaned forward, clasping his hands. "The summit concluded an hour ago. We secured $1.2 billion in commitments. The Financial Times piece was killed, and the Wall Street Journal ran your counter-narrative on the front page of the business section. It was, by all metrics, a flawless execution." "Thank you." "However," Hunter continued, a faint, dangerous smile playing on his lips, "you are currently trending higher on social media than the actual climate initiative. The internet has dubbed you the Monaco Siren." Claire groaned, burying her face in her hands. "I am so sorry. I will pack my bags. Evelyn can—" "I don't want you to pack your bags," Hunter interrupted softly. Claire lowered her hands, looking at him in surprise. "My head of global communications quit," Hunter said, his tone shifting back to business, though his eyes remained locked on hers. "The position is based in London, with heavy travel to New York and Geneva. The starting salary is double what Evelyn paid you for this weekend, plus equity in our new green tech fund. I want you to take the job." Claire's breath hitched. "Hunter, I've been out of the corporate world for 7 years. I worked for a startup." "You built a startup," Hunter corrected, his voice firm. "Evelyn told me exactly what you did for Gwen Belmont. She told me how he erased you from the cap table. I read the Belmont Dynamics seed prospectus last night. Your fingerprints are all over it. Gwen Belmont is a charismatic salesman, but the operational genius was yours. I don't care about the last 7 years. I care about what you did for me in the last 72 hours. He stood up, walking over to the window to look out at the Mediterranean. "And regarding the photograph," Hunter added, his back to her, his voice dropping an octave, "I have no intention of issuing a denial. If the world thinks I am fortunate enough to have a woman like you by my side, I see no reason to correct them." He turned back to face her. "Unless, of course, you find the association objectionable." Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. The transition from Gwen's belittling to Hunter's empowering challenge was a whiplash she welcomed. She stood up, smoothing the front of her skirt, matching his intense gaze. "Draft the contract, Hunter. I want a signing bonus, and I want full autonomy over the global press team." Hunter's smile widened into a genuine grin. "Done." By Friday, Claire was installed in a corner office in Mayfair, London. Her phone had been blowing up for days with messages from New York. Former friends who had ghosted her when she left Gwen were suddenly texting her, desperate for the inside scoop. And then there was Gwen. He had called 47 times. He had sent emails ranging from furious to pleading. On Friday afternoon, right before a strategy meeting, her private cell phone buzzed. It was him again. This time she answered. "Hello, Gwen," Claire said smoothly, staring out at the London skyline. "Claire! Jesus Christ, finally!" Gwen's voice was frantic, lacking its usual polished arrogance. "What the hell is going on? You're in Monaco. You're with Hunter Kensington. Are you out of your mind? Do you know who that guy is?" "I do, actually. He's my new boss. I'm the head of global communications for Kensington Capital." Silence hung on the line. A heavy, suffocating silence. "You're lying," Gwen finally sputtered. "You can't get a job like that. You don't have the resume." "Turns out, billionaires value actual competence over a padded LinkedIn profile," Claire replied icily. "Was there a reason you called, Gwen? I have a board meeting in 3 minutes." "You need to come home," Gwen said, his tone turning desperate. "Belmont Dynamics is bleeding. The new software patch failed. The press is slaughtering us, and Chloe sent the Q3 projections to the wrong investor group. Harrison Caldwell is threatening to pull his funding. I need you here to fix this. We can talk about our living situation. We can work this out." Claire actually laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "You told me I would never find better, Gwen. You told me I'd be nothing without you. Look in the mirror. You're bleeding out because you fired your architect to sleep with your secretary. I'm not your fixer anymore. Claire, don't do this. You owe me." "I owe you nothing," Claire cut in, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Lose my number, Gwen. If you contact me again, Hunter's legal team will file a harassment injunction before you can blink." She ended the call, blocked his number, and walked into a board meeting. She had a global empire to protect. 6 months is an eternity in the world of high finance and tech. For Claire Sterling, 6 months meant a complete metamorphosis. She had relocated permanently to London, moving into a stunning, minimalist flat in South Kensington. She had revamped Hunter's entire public image, positioning Kensington Capital not just as a ruthless hedge fund, but as a pioneer in sustainable, ethical acquisitions. And inevitably, the professional lines between her and Hunter had completely dissolved. It started with late-night dinners after grueling board meetings, discussing philosophy and art rather than profit margins. It escalated to weekend trips to his estate in the Scottish Highlands, where they would walk his spaniels in the biting wind, bundled in wool coats, finding a quiet, profound comfort in each other's silence. Hunter didn't need a cheerleader. He didn't need someone to stroke his ego. He needed an equal. He found it in Claire. They challenged each other, debated fiercely, and respected each other immensely. Their first kiss happened in the pouring rain outside the Tate Modern, unscripted and entirely inevitable, cementing a partnership that terrified Hunter's rivals. For Gwen Belmont, those same 6 months had been a slow, agonizing descent into hell. Belmont Dynamics was hemorrhaging cash. Without Claire's meticulous oversight, Gwen's reckless spending and aggressive timelines had caught up with him. Chloe, it turned out, was excellent at picking out cashmere sweaters, but completely incapable of managing a corporate schedule. After she accidentally leaked a confidential merger document to a tech blogger, Gwen had unceremoniously fired her, blaming her entirely for his own lack of oversight. Now, Gwen was desperate. He needed a Series D funding round just to make payroll for the next 2 quarters. His primary investors, led by the ruthless Harrison Caldwell, had given him an ultimatum: secure a major anchor investor at the Global Innovators Summit in Geneva, or they would force him out as CEO. The Geneva Summit was the most exclusive tech and finance gathering in Europe. Held at a heavily fortified chateau overlooking Lake Geneva, it was an invitation-only affair for the top 0.1% of global wealth. Gwen arrived in Geneva sweating through his custom Tom Ford suit. He spent the first 2 hours of the opening gala desperately cornering venture capitalists, his pitch sounding increasingly frantic. Every time he was met with polite, icy rejections. Word was out: Belmont Dynamics was toxic. He retreated to the sprawling, crystal-chandeliered ballroom, grabbing a glass of champagne to steady his nerves. That was when the room seemed to go quiet. The massive oak doors at the top of the grand staircase opened. Hunter Kensington stood there, exuding a quiet, lethal authority in a perfectly tailored midnight blue tuxedo. And on his arm, looking like a goddess descended from Mount Olympus, was Claire. She wore a custom Alexander McQueen gown, a masterpiece of structured black silk and delicate lace that accentuated her silhouette. Around her neck rested a simple, blindingly brilliant diamond pendant, but it wasn't the clothes or the jewelry that made Gwen's breath catch in his throat. It was her posture. She radiated an aura of absolute, untouchable power. She wasn't standing behind Hunter. She was standing beside him. As they descended the stairs, the crowd naturally parted. Billionaires, tech moguls, and European royalty leaned in to greet them. Gwen watched, paralyzed by a sickening mixture of rage and profound regret, as Claire effortlessly navigated the room. She spoke fluent French to a Swiss banker, laughed warmly with a German industrialist, and commanded the attention of the very men who had just rejected Gwen. He couldn't stand it. The narcissism that had blinded him for years flared up in a desperate bid for control. He set his glass down and pushed his way through the crowd. Claire was standing near the champagne tower, finishing a conversation with a prominent venture capitalist, when she felt a hand grab her elbow. She turned, her polite smile vanishing instantly. "Claire," Gwen said, his voice a harsh, desperate whisper. He looked terrible. The bags under his eyes were deep, and he smelled faintly of panic and stale alcohol. Claire calmly but forcefully pulled her arm out of his grasp. "Gwen, do not touch me." "We need to talk," he demanded, stepping closer, trying to use his height to intimidate her as he used to. "Right now, privately." "We have nothing to discuss," Claire replied, her voice perfectly level, carrying enough ice to freeze the lake outside. "If you're looking for the restrooms, they are down the hall." "Stop playing the Ice Queen," Gwen hissed, glancing around nervously to ensure no one was listening. "Look at you, playing dress-up with Kensington's money. Do you really think he respects you? You're a trophy, Claire, a PR stunt. Once he gets bored, he'll toss you aside just like you did." Claire finished the sentence for him, her eyes flashing with a dangerous amusement. "Oh, Gwen, your projection is embarrassing." She took a step toward him, entirely unafraid. "I don't play dress-up. I run his global strategy. I sit on his board, and unlike you, Hunter isn't threatened by a woman who is smarter than he is. Now back away from me before I have security throw you out." "You can't do that," Gwen sneered, puffing out his chest. "I'm the CEO of Belmont Dynamics. I belong here. You're just a +1. "Actually, Gwen, she's not the +1. The deep, gravelly voice came from right behind Gwen. Gwen spun around to find Hunter Kensington standing there. Hunter was 6 inches taller than Gwen, and he didn't look angry. He looked entirely, devastatingly bored. "Mr. Kensington," Gwen stammered, his arrogance evaporating in a millisecond. He thrust out his hand. "Gwen Belmont. Belmont Dynamics. It's an honor to finally—" Hunter didn't look at the hand. He looked at Gwen as if he were a mildly interesting insect that had crawled onto the parquet floor. "I know who you are, Mr. Belmont," Hunter said smoothly, slipping his arm around Claire's waist and pulling her gently to his side. "Claire has told me a great deal about your management style." Gwen forced a tight, artificial laugh. "Well, you know how startups are. Fast-paced, high stress. We had our creative differences. Speaking of which, I've been wanting to get a meeting with your acquisitions team. Belmont Dynamics is pivoting into AI-driven supply chains, and with a minor cash injection—" "We aren't interested in investing in Belmont Dynamics, Gwen," Hunter cut him off, his voice cutting through the ballroom chatter like a scythe. I see," Gwen swallowed hard, his face flushing crimson. "Well, your loss. We have 3 other term sheets on the table from—" "You have no term sheets on the table," Hunter said calmly. "Harrison Caldwell pulled his backing at 4 p.m. today. You are currently in breach of your debt covenants." Gwen's face drained of all color, his jaw dropped. How do you know that? That's confidential." Hunter smiled. It was the smile of a great white shark, just before the strike. "Because, Gwen, as of 5 p.m. today, Kensington Capital bought out Harrison Caldwell's position. We acquired your primary debt." Hunter paused, letting the absolute horror wash over Gwen's face. "We own your company." Gwen staggered back a half step, looking wildly between Hunter and Claire. You can't do that. That's a hostile takeover. I'm the CEO. I built that company." "You built nothing," Claire finally spoke, her voice ringing with the finality of a judge delivering a sentence. "You stole the blueprints, took the credit, and alienated everyone who actually did the work. You told me I'd be nothing without you, Gwen. Turns out, you're the one who is nothing without me." Hunter turned to Claire, his eyes softening entirely. "Shall we go to dinner, darling? I find the air in here has suddenly become quite stale." "I would love that," Claire said. They turned their backs on Gwen Belmont, leaving him standing alone in the center of the glittering ballroom, a hollow shell of a man who had finally realized the true cost of his own hubris. The flight back to New York from Geneva was the longest 8 hours of Gwen Belmont's life. He spent it pacing the aisle of his chartered Gulfstream, a jet he now realized he could no longer afford, frantically making calls over the patchy satellite Wi-Fi. Every single call went to voicemail. His board members, his lead developers, even his country club buddies. The financial world is a hyper-connected ecosystem, and the scent of blood travels faster than light. By the time his plane touched down at Teterboro Airport, the news had leaked to Bloomberg. Kensington Capital executes hostile debt-to-equity, takeover of Belmont Dynamics. Gwen's black car dropped him off at the Belmont Dynamics, headquarters in Hudson Yards. He stormed into the lobby, ready to rally his troops, ready to unleash a barrage of legal threats. But the atmosphere in the office was chillingly quiet. Staff members wouldn't meet his eyes. Desks were being packed into cardboard boxes. Standing in front of the glass doors of his corner office were two men in dark suits, built like linebackers. "Excuse me," Gwen barked, his face red. "Move! That is my office." "Not anymore, Mr. Belmont," a crisp, distinctly British voice echoed down the hallway. Gwen turned. Walking toward him, flanked by a phalanx of corporate lawyers carrying thick briefcases, was Hunter Kensington's lead counsel, a terrifyingly composed man named Thomas Sterling, no relation to Claire, but carrying the same aura of absolute zero tolerance. "Mr. Kensington's team took physical possession of the building at 6 a.m., Thomas said, adjusting his spectacles. "You have been suspended as CEO pending a forensic financial review. You are here to sign the transition documents. Please step into the conference room." Gwen's bravado faltered, but his ego refused to die. "You can't do this. I have founder's shares. I have a golden parachute clause. You want me out? Fine. Buy me out. I want 50 million, and I walk away today." Thomas offered a thin, pitying smile. "We aren't buying you out, Gwen. We are evicting you, and I strongly suggest you sit down, because the person leading this restructuring meeting has zero patience for your theatrics." The heavy oak doors of the main conference room swung open. Sitting at the head of the long mahogany table, a stack of heavily redacted financial ledgers in front of her, was Claire. She wore a sharp, charcoal-grey tailored suit, her hair pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. She didn't look up when Gwen entered. She simply continued highlighting a line item with a yellow marker. Hunter Kensington was nowhere in sight. He had handed her the keys to the kingdom and stepped back, letting her wield the sword. "Claire," Gwen sneered, pulling out a chair at the opposite end of the table and slumping into it. "So this is your grand revenge? Playing executioner for your new boyfriend? It's pathetic." Claire finally looked up. Her expression was devoid of anger, sadness, or even satisfaction. It was purely clinical. "Hello, Gwen," she said, her voice echoing in the large room. "Let's get straight to the point. When Kensington Capital acquired your debt from Harrison Caldwell, we also gained the right to audit your books. Since I know exactly how you operate, I knew exactly where to look." She slid a thick, bound folder across the polished wood. It stopped precisely in front of Gwen. "What is this garbage?" he asked, refusing to touch it. "That is a heavily documented trail of your gross fiduciary negligence," Claire stated evenly. "You thought you were so clever, hiding assets in those airtight, offshore trusts you bragged about. But you were lazy, Gwen. You used the company's operating account to funnel money through shell corporations to pay for the Hamptons renovation." Gwen's face twitched. "That was a corporate retreat property. You transferred the deed to your personal name 3 weeks ago," Claire fired back, her eyes narrowing. "That is embezzlement. Furthermore, we found the expense reports. $200,000 in consulting fees paid to an LLC registered to Chloe Davies. An LLC that produced 0 deliverables, but curiously matches the exact price of the Cartier jewelry and Balenciaga wardrobe you bought her." The room was dead silent. The lawyers lining the walls watched Gwen, the way one watches a car crash in slow motion. "You're fishing." Gwen swallowed hard, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. "This is a witch hunt. This is a criminal indictment waiting to happen," Claire corrected him softly. "You breached your fiduciary duty to your investors, you committed wire fraud, and you drove a $300 million valuation into the ground in 6 months because you were thinking with your ego instead of your brain." She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, clasping her hands. "Here is what is going to happen, Gwen. You are going to sign the document in front of you. It surrenders all your remaining equity in Belmont Dynamics. It waves your golden parachute. You walk away with absolutely nothing. In exchange, Kensington Capital will not hand these files over to the SEC and the Southern District of New York. We will bury your incompetence, and you will slink away quietly." "Nothing?" Gwen's voice cracked. The reality was finally piercing the armor of his narcissism. I built this. This is my life. You can't leave me with nothing, Claire. I'll be ruined. Look in the mirror, Gwen, Claire said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried across the room, echoing the exact words he had used against her months ago. You are 34, unemployable, and entirely dependent on my mercy. You will never, ever find a better deal than the one I am offering you right now. Gwen stared at her. He looked for a trace of the woman who used to rub his shoulders when he was stressed, the woman who had cried when he belittled her, the woman who had packed a single suitcase and walked out into the rain. She was gone. In her place was a titan. With shaking hands, Gwen picked up the solid gold Mont Blanc pen, the very pen Claire had bought him to celebrate their first $1 million in seed funding, and signed his name on the dotted line. He didn't say a word as he stood up. He didn't look at the lawyers. He walked out of the glass doors, stepped into the elevator, and vanished. Claire watched the doors close. She took a slow, deep breath, releasing a breath she felt she had been holding for 7 years. Thomas Sterling stepped forward, picking up the signed document. Flawlessly executed, Miss Sterling. Mr. Kensington will be pleased. Thank you, Thomas, Claire said, standing up and smoothing her jacket. Now, let's get to work. We have a company to rebuild. 18 months later. The persistent, irritating drip of a leaky faucet echoed through the cramped one-bedroom apartment in Astoria, Queens. Gwen Belmont sat on a sagging plaid sofa, staring at his laptop screen. His inbox was empty. It had been empty for weeks. After signing away his company, Gwen had tried to pivot. He tried to launch a new consulting firm, leveraging his status as a former tech CEO, but the industry knew. They didn't know the exact details of his ousting. Hunter's lawyers had ensured the NDA was ironclad, but they knew he was toxic. Venture capitalists wouldn't take his calls. Headhunters politely told him he was overqualified for entry-level roles and too high risk for executive positions. He had tried reaching out to Chloe a year ago, right after he had to sell his customized Rolex to pay rent. She had blocked his number, having quickly moved on to a crypto bro who had a house in Miami. Gwen's life had shrunk to the 4 walls of this apartment. He opened a cheap beer, his eyes drifting to the small television resting on a milk crate in the corner. It was tuned to CNBC's Squawk Box. We're shifting gears this morning to talk about the biggest tech turnaround of the decade, the anchor said, leaning into the camera. 2 years ago, Belmont Dynamics was on the brink of collapse. Today, under its new banner, Aegis Global Logistics, it has just secured a massive multi-billion-dollar government contract to overhaul sustainable supply chains across Europe and North America. Joining us live from London is the architect of this miraculous resurrection, Aegis Global CAO Claire Sterling. Gwen dropped his beer. It spilled over the cheap carpet, but it didn't move. The screen cut to a split screen. There was Claire. She looked radiant. She was sitting in a high-tech, glass-walled office with the London skyline behind her. She commanded the screen with a natural, effortless charisma. "Good morning, Andrew." Claire smiled warmly at the anchor. "Claire, the turnaround is staggering," the anchor said. "You completely restructured the proprietary AI, slashed the operational waste, and pivoted hard into green energy. Critics initially thought Kensington Capital made a mistake buying distressed debt. Now, Aegis is valued at over $2 billion. How did you do it?" "We stripped away the ego, Andrew," Claire answered, her voice steady and resonant. "The original framework had potential, but it was being suffocated by poor leadership and a lack of vision. I brought in a team that valued collaboration over credit. We focused on the actual technology, not the vanity metrics." The anchor nodded enthusiastically. "And speaking of leadership, your transition from public relations to the CEO chair is highly unusual. Your predecessor, Gwen Belmont, founded the company. Do you feel you're building on his legacy?" Gwen held his breath in his tiny living room. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the sofa. On screen, Claire let out a soft, dismissive chuckle. It wasn't bitter. It was worse. It was utterly indifferent. Gwen Belmont was a brief, necessary learning experience, Claire said smoothly, her eyes locking onto the camera lens as if she could see straight into the Queen's apartment. He taught me exactly what not to do. Aegis Global is moving forward. We don't look in the rearview mirror. The interview concluded with discussion of her upcoming keynote speech at the World Economic Forum. The anchor thanked her, the screen faded to a commercial, and Gwen was left sitting in the silence of his ruined life. He realized then the absolute, crushing truth. He hadn't just lost a company. He had actively destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to him, and in doing so, he had handed her the tools to conquer the world without him. Thousands of miles away, in the top-floor executive suite of the Aegis Global building in London, Claire pulled off her earpiece and let out a long sigh. The television cameras powered down. The heavy door to her office clicked open. Hunter Kensington walked in, carrying 2 glasses of rare Japanese whiskey. He walked around her massive desk, handed her a glass, and leaned against the edge of the mahogany wood. "Brilliant interview," Hunter said, his grey eyes shining with profound pride. "The board is going to be ecstatic about the government contract announcement." Claire took a sip of the whiskey, letting the warmth settle in her chest. She looked up at the man who had seen her worth when she had forgotten it herself. "Thank you," she smiled, reaching out to rest her hand on his arm. "But we have a problem." Hunter raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "Yes," Claire said, standing up and closing the distance between them. "I have a flight to Davos in 4 hours, and I haven't packed. And my husband promised he was going to handle the logistics for this trip." Hunter chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close, the diamond wedding band on his left hand, catching the light of the London sun. "Your husband is a very busy man," Hunter murmured, kissing the top of her head. "But for the CEO of Aegis Global, I suppose I can make an exception." Claire rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady, reliable beat of his heart. She looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling city below. She had built this, with her brilliance, her resilience, and a partner who stood beside her instead of in front of her. She had been told she would never find better. She had found the best. And more importantly, she had finally become it. The ultimate revenge against a narcissist isn't shouting matches, slashed tires, or bitter legal battles. The ultimate revenge is absolute, spectacular success, followed by complete indifference. Gwen Belmont believed that by destroying Claire's confidence, he could permanently tether her to his shadow. He fatally misunderstood that pressure doesn't just crush. It creates diamonds. Claire's journey from a discarded, belittled partner to a global powerhouse is a testament to the fact that our worth is never defined by those who are too blind to see it. She didn't just survive the ashes of her marriage, she used them to forge an empire. True power lies in recognizing your own brilliance, walking away from toxic environments, and aligning yourself with people who celebrate your strength rather than fear it. In the end, Claire didn't just find a better man. She found a better version of herself.